The last time I needed to drive to a grocery store was 1987. My wife was pregnant with our second. Roads iced over. We couldn't get out for 6 days. We ate fine. 3 meals a day, hot food, nothing rationed. Not one item on that table came from a store. Now here's what I want you to understand about that. It wasn't an emergency. It wasn't survival mode. It was just Tuesday. The system was already running. The ice storm didn't change anything except that we noticed it was running. My name is Earl Pruitt, 3 generations on the same ground in the Texas Panhandle. My grandfather built this system in the 1920s. I've been running it for 40 years without stopping. Before we're done, you're going to see exactly what we grow, what we raise, how we store it through a Panhandle winter, and this is the part most people don't believe, the complete list of what we actually buy from a store. It's 4 things. I'll tell you what they are at the end. Last year, this half-acre produced over 800 pounds of food. My wife and I ate from it October through the following September without buying a single vegetable. I want to show you how that math works, because it does work, and it works on ground that isn't special and in conditions that aren't forgiving. Stay with me. The part that surprises most people isn't the growing. It's what comes after. Half an acre. That's the whole operation. Most people hear that and think I'm leaving something out. I'm not. But there's a reason it works on half an acre that took me 20 years to fully understand. And my grandfather understood from the first season because he had no margin for error. We don't grow what's interesting. We grow what stores. Those are 2 completely different gardens. A garden built around what tastes good in July will leave you at the grocery store by December. A garden built around what keeps will feed you in February without asking anything of you. That's the distinction my grandfather made in 1921 and never reconsidered. The backbone here is root vegetables: potatoes, carrots, onions, turnips, sweet potatoes. We're in the Texas Panhandle, 180 frost-free days, hot, dry summers, late freezes possible into April. Root vegetables grow here without fighting the land, and they store without electricity. 200 pounds of potatoes, 150 pounds of onions, 100 pounds of carrots packed in damp sand in the cellar. Those 3 crops alone bridge November to May. The warm season crops, tomatoes, corn, beans, squash, peppers, are preservation crops. That's a different category entirely. We're not growing them to eat fresh all summer. We're growing them in volume so they can be put away in July and August and eaten as jars from November to the following May. My wife put up 200 quarts of tomato products last summer. That shelf exists right now while I'm talking to you. Squash cures 2 weeks on the back porch after harvest. The skin hardens, the sugar concentrates, bruises seal over, then it goes in the cellar for 4 to 6 months without any processing at all. A crop that takes care of itself after harvest was something my grandfather specifically valued. Less you have to do in February, the better. Dried beans go into grain sacks, shelf life of years, no canning, no processing, no electricity. My grandfather grew them because they asked almost nothing of him after August and gave back all winter. We keep a strip of grain sorghum on the south edge of the garden. I'll explain exactly why that matters when we get to the calendar. For now, just know, that strip has saved this family twice in 40 years, and my grandfather never took it out. Last year, this half-acre produced over 800 pounds of food. I want you to hold that number while I show you the rest of the system. By the time we get to the cellar, you're going to see exactly where every pound of it went, and the number is going to make sense in a way it doesn't yet. My grandfather planted those apple trees in 1938. I ate apples off them this past March. That's 87 years of return on one afternoon of labor, no spray program, no annual input, no purchase of any kind. They produce because they're in the right place and they've had time. Here's what most people miss when they start thinking about a food system. The garden is annual. The orchard is infrastructure. It takes 10 years to build, and then it outlives you. My grandfather didn't plant those trees for himself. He planted them for whoever was going to be farming this ground after him. That's a relationship with land that's almost disappeared. apples, plums, pears, a row of elderberries along the fence. The syrup my wife makes in September is the first thing we reach for in January when someone gets sick. And asparagus in the same bed my grandmother planted in 1941. Comes up every April without being asked. First fresh food after a long winter. 83 years of return on seeds she put in the ground once. Apples store individually wrapped in newspaper in the root cellar. The newspaper slows the ethylene exchange between fruits, extends shelf life by 2 months. My grandfather learned that somewhere. I didn't figure it out myself, and I want to be clear about that. A lot of what I know I inherited. The job I've had is not letting it disappear. What falls from the trees before we get to it goes to the hogs. Nothing leaves this system. There's a question I get asked more than almost any other. People want to know how to start, what to do first. I'll answer that at the end, but I'll tell you right now, the answer has something to do with what I just showed you. The orchard comes before almost everything else. Plant it before you think you're ready. 20 hens. That's the whole flock. My grandfather kept 20 laying hens his whole life and never bought an egg. I keep 20 hens. I have never bought an egg. I don't know why that number works so consistently, but it does, and I've never felt the need to change it. 20 hens produce 15 to 18 eggs a day in peak season. In winter, production drops to almost nothing without supplemental light. My grandfather solved this the same way he solved most problems, by paying attention to the calendar early enough that the problem never became a crisis. In April, when the hens are laying heavy, my wife fills a 5-gallon crock with water glass solution and submerges eggs pointy end down. Sodium silicate seals the shells completely airtight. Those April eggs come out in January, indistinguishable from fresh. One crock holds 15 dozen eggs. The USDA officially recommended this method during World War II. It's still legal and safe today. Most people have never heard of it because there's no product to sell alongside it. A quart of sodium silicate costs almost nothing. A dozen January eggs from a grocery store costs $4. Multiply that by 15 dozen, and you start to understand why the knowledge disappeared. For meat, we raise 50 to 60 birds in 2 batches, May and September. Feed is scratch grain from our own wheat and sorghum, kitchen scraps, and free range. We don't buy feed, 20 hens. Between those birds and the 2 hogs I'm going to show you next, this family has never needed a meat counter, not once in 40 years. What I haven't told you yet is what those hogs actually produce beyond the obvious. Stay with me on that. 2 hogs every November since 1985. My grandfather started it in 1923. We haven't missed a year. First hard freeze means butchering day. 2 hogs at 250 pounds each gives roughly 350 pounds of usable product. Hams, shoulder roasts, bacon slabs, sausage meat, lard, cracklings, salt pork. Nothing is wasted. Feet go in the pot. Organ meat gets eaten first. Fat becomes the year's cooking grease. Most people think about the meat. The part that actually runs the kitchen is the lard. 25 to 30 pounds of lard from 2 hogs. That's every pound of cooking fat this family uses for an entire year. Every biscuit, every skillet of cornbread, every piece of fried chicken, cooked in fat, we rendered ourselves in November from animals. We raised ourselves on grain. We grew ourselves. That chain has no weak link because we control every part of it. The Harvard School of Public Health confirmed in 2017 that rendered lard contains monounsaturated oleic acid, the same compound in olive oil, and is lower in saturated fat than butter. We spent 60 years being told it would kill us. My grandmother cooked in it her whole life and died at 94. The Crisco generation didn't do as well. The preservation sequence, hams into a dry cure, salt, brown sugar, black pepper, saltpeter, packed in a wooden box, turned every 3 days for 6 weeks. Then 2 weeks of cool mesquite smoke at 85 to 90 degrees. Then hanging in the cellar for 9 to 12 months. A properly cured Panhandle ham gets better Every month it hangs. I want to tell you something honest. We lost a hog in 2003, sick before butchering, couldn't be used. That was a hard winter on the meat side. We stretched one hog further than it was meant to go and ate more beans than usual from January on. The system isn't perfect, but one hard year in 40 doesn't change what I think of it. We got through without going to a store. When a system fails and still holds, that tells you something about the system. There's been flour on this farm since 1901. Not a bag of it came from a store. We keep a small plot of open-pollinated winter wheat separate from the cash crop fields. Heritage variety. Deep-rooted, drought-adapted to this specific ground over decades of selection. Planted in September, harvested in June, threshed, cleaned, stored in grain barrels. Here's what most people don't know about flour. Commercial flour is shelf-stable for 2 years because the germ has been removed. The germ is where the nutrition lives. Fresh ground whole wheat has a shelf life of a few days because the oils in the germ are alive and active, which sounds like a problem until you understand that we grind what we need when we need it. Grain in the berry keeps for years. We grind it into flour the day we bake. The bread this produces is not the same product as what comes in a bag from the store. I'm not saying that as a preference. I'm saying it as a fact about what flour actually is when nothing has been removed from it. Dried corn goes through the same mill for cornmeal. The grain sorghum strip in the garden, the one I mentioned earlier, can be ground as a flour substitute in a wheat short year. We've needed it twice in 40 years. Both times it was there. The wheat grows. We grind it. We eat it. There's no third party in that arrangement, and there never has been. Everything I've shown you, the garden, the orchard, the hogs, the chickens, the wheat, none of it means anything without this. My grandfather dug this cellar in 1923. He walked the property for 2 full days before he decided where to dig. North-facing slope, 8 feet down, stone walls, dirt floor, double wood door with an air gap between them to hold temperature across seasons. Ventilation pipe in the back wall to exhaust ethylene gas from stored apples. Without that pipe, the apples ripen everything else in the cellar too fast, and you lose the winter's food in October. Year-round temperature, 50 to 55 degrees. Humidity, 85%. Cornell University research published in 2021 confirmed that these conditions preserve more nutrients in root vegetables than any modern cold storage, because slow natural temperature variation mimics the ground where the plants evolved. My grandfather didn't know that. He knew the carrots kept better here than anywhere else. That was enough. Here's what's in this cellar right now. 300 pounds of potatoes in wooden crates, single layer, cured 2 weeks before storing. 150 pounds of onions, tops braided, hanging from the ceiling. Onions and potatoes, stored in the same room, ripen each other faster, so they're separated by a partition my grandfather built in 1931. 100 pounds of carrots packed in damp sand. The sand holds moisture without rotting. 40 heads of cabbage hung upside down from their roots. Bushels of apples individually wrapped in newspaper. 200 quart jars on shelves. Tomato products, green beans, fruit, pickles, relish. Cured hams and bacon hanging from the rafters. Crocks of lard, salt pork, and sauerkraut along the back wall. Grain barrels in the corner. This is where 800 pounds of garden and a year of raising animals becomes 12 months of eating. This cellar has never been empty. Not in 100 years. Not during the Dust Bowl. Not during the farm crisis of the 80s when every neighbor around us was in debt to banks that didn't care whether they ate. Not during the ice storm in 1987 when we couldn't get out for 6 days. Not once. This room is why. Not the garden, not the hogs, not the chickens. This room. You can grow everything on earth and starve in February if you don't know how to keep it. Here's the part nobody talks about. Self-sufficiency doesn't happen all at once. It happens in a sequence. Miss that sequence by 2 weeks in any direction, and you're short on food in February when there's nothing you can do about it. My grandfather ran this farm off a mental calendar he carried for 60 years and never wrote down. I wrote mine down in 1984, and I've followed it since. February and March. The cellar is running low. First asparagus from the cold frame, early greens, last of the stored apples. This is the lean stretch. How lean it is depends entirely on how well you worked in August. April and May. Cool season garden goes in. Hens start laying heavy. Water glassing begins. June. Wheat harvest. Spring chicken batch butchered. Early fruit canned. This is when most people think the hard work is over. It isn't. It's about to start. July and August, the heavy weeks. Tomatoes, corn, beans coming in every day. My wife and I spend most of these 2 months putting food away. 12-hour days during the peak. This is when the winter gets built, or it doesn't. There's no fixing it later. September. Fall garden planted. Apples harvested and wrapped. Second chicken batch butchered. Elderberry syrup made. October and November. Root vegetables harvested and cellared. Squash cured on the porch. Hog butchering. The cellar goes from nearly empty to full in 6 weeks. December and January. The cellar is full. The family eats from it. Nothing needs to be grown or processed. The work is done. This is when you find out if you worked smart enough in summer. My grandfather said there were 2 kinds of farmers, the ones who worked hardest in summer and the ones who worked smartest in summer. The ones who worked smart ate fine in February. The ones who just worked hard went to the store. I said 4 things at the start. Here they are. Salt. Always have. Always will. You cannot cure meat without it, you cannot preserve without it, and you cannot produce it in the Texas Panhandle. This is the one true dependency in the system, and my grandfather acknowledged it without apology. Every self-sufficient farm in history bought salt. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. Coffee. I'll admit to that without hesitation. Sugar. Less than you'd think. Most sweetening comes from sorghum syrup we make ourselves and honey from 2 hives behind the barn. But we buy some sugar. Canning requires it. Baking powder. That's the list. I have not bought a vegetable, a piece of meat, an egg, a bag of flour, or a jar of anything preserved in longer than I can clearly remember. The grocery store sells 4 things I need. Everything else, it sells me things I already have. That's not ideology. That's not a political statement. That's just what 40 years of paying attention to one piece of ground looks like when you add it up. I know what you're thinking. You don't have 40 acres. You don't have a grandfather who showed you how. You don't have a root cellar that's been running since 1923. Neither did my grandfather when he started. He built it because conditions required him to, on ground with no proven record, with nobody ahead of him to follow. The first year the cellar wasn't full. The second year it was closer. By the 10th year, the system was running the way it runs now. Here's what I'd tell someone starting from nothing. Plant the orchard first, before anything else. Because those trees take 10 years to produce, and every year you wait is a year you'll never get back. Plant them before you think you're ready. Then 6 hens. Not 26. Learn what 6 hens require before you scale. Then 1 bed of potatoes, 20 square feet of onions, 1 season of understanding what it actually takes to grow something and keep it. Don't try to build the whole system at once. Build 1 piece this year. Get that right. Add the next piece the year after. In 10 years, you'll have something. In 20 years, you'll have what I have. Come down to the comments and tell me what piece you're starting with and where you're farming. Tell me what the land is like where you are. Tell me what your family already knew before you had to look it up. That's where this conversation belongs, between people paying attention to the same problems on different pieces of ground. Keep your roots in the ground.